They said my grass was too green, too uniform, suspiciously maintained. The man said, clipboard in hand, tone flat like a bad actor reading from a fake script. I almost laughed. Almost. But the way he stood there, mirrored sunglasses hiding his eyes, as he slapped the citation sticker on my mailbox, that's when I knew. This wasn't a routine HOA visit. It was a setup. The guy in the khakis didn't realize the man he was trying to shake down. The quiet one in a hoodie and old boots wasn't just another homeowner. I was internal affairs. And this whole little act, it had just become evidence. The morning had felt off from the start. Too calm. The birds outside chirped like a sound effect loop. My coffee brewed a little too perfectly. Even the neighbor's yappy chihuahua hadn't started its usual siren routine. So when that tan sedan with no official logo pulled up like it owned the block, I knew trouble had clocked in early. He didn't announce himself. Just walked onto my lawn and started scribbling. Said my mailbox was too shiny. Dangerous glare, he claimed. I asked if he had ID. He smiled like a lone shark and said, "You don't need to see that." Then hinted the fines could disappear for a little cash. My hand tightened on the coffee mug. A bribe. Right there in my driveway. What he didn't know was that my front mic was already rolling, and my backyard camera had eyes on him. He handed me a form with no HOA letterhead, just scribbled fines and a loopy signature. Gary Moffat. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from, because what happened next? It turned my quiet cul-de-sac into the front lines of a war no one saw coming. I played along. Didn't flinch, didn't call him out. Just gave him a casual nod and said, "Let me grab my wallet." Slipped back inside, calm on the outside. Inside, alarms blaring. 2 minutes. That's all I needed to reroute the camera feed, lock the audio to my private drive, and send a quiet ping to an old friend in the DA's office. Subject line, HOA grift. You're going to love this. When I came back, Gary was taking pictures of my hummingbird feeder. The man was casing my property like it was a crime scene. Flower bed? Overly symmetrical. Shed? Unpermitted structure. Even the garden hose got a side eye. He wasn't documenting violations. He was building leverage. So I gave him a folded 20. He took it without blinking. "Pleasure doing business," he said, tapping the violation form. "Expect the final amount next week. Might be high unless you're cooperative." He winked. I watched him strut back to his car like he just pulled off a successful hit job. That clipboard in his hand, it wasn't paperwork. It was a weapon, and I just disarmed him. Back inside, I ran his name through the HOA registry. No official title, not even a contractor, just a volunteer enforcement associate. Whatever that meant, but that wasn't the twist. No, the twist was what came next. Gary Moffat had 2 prior citations for impersonating a city code officer. Both charges dropped. Quietly, which told me one thing. Someone with power was shielding him. By noon, I'd heard from 3 neighbors. All had been hit by Gary. Fined for tulips, outdoor furniture, seasonal flags. But here's what connected them. Each had refused to sign a petition the HOA president pushed last month. This wasn't enforcement. This was retaliation. And I was going to blow it wide open. I spent that afternoon digging like I was back on the job. HOA meeting notes, archive bylaws, forum posts, anything that smelled like Gary. And what I found wasn't just a trail. It was a blueprint. Same guy, same threats, same clipboard routine. Only difference? No one had fought back. Not until now. Turns out, Gary had become a known presence on neighborhood threads. People described him as the fine guy, clipboard creep, even the HOA bounty hunter. But it wasn't just the absurd tickets, like one homeowner fined for a non-standard wind chime. It was the quiet implications. The "you can pay this off" hints. The way fines vanished after hush payments. I started mapping his visits. Cross-referenced the addresses with home values and recent listings. Then it hit me. He wasn't choosing houses at random. They were targeting homes just under market peak, usually where owners had rejected board proposals. Coincidence? Not a chance. I pulled up one neighbor's listing, flagged repeatedly for minor violations. She'd sold 2 months ago, below asking price. Guess who the buyer was? A third-party agency tied to Kellerman Realty. HOA president's husband ran it. Yeah, that's when the pattern stopped being suspicious and started being criminal. This wasn't just Gary being a little clipboard tyrant. It was a shakedown, a pressure campaign to scare people into selling low. And the board, especially Brenda Kellerman, was using him as their bulldog. That's when I made the decision. I wasn't just filing a complaint. I was going to torch the whole scheme. I started by contacting Harold across the street. Old school vet, friendly smile, always feeding squirrels. When I told him what I'd uncovered and played him the audio of Gary's little bribery pitch, his entire demeanor changed. "I've been waiting for someone to do something," he said, standing slow. "Come inside. I've got files." Harold's living room looked like a war bunker disguised as a library, military plaques on one wall, overflowing manila folders on the coffee table. He handed me one. "They've been at this for months," he muttered. "Thought I was imagining it. Thought I was getting paranoid." Inside the folder, violation after violation. Improper flag mount. Unauthorized pumpkin on Halloween. Lawn height discrepancy. Every letter signed, barely legible, with the same loopy scribble. "Gary's." "I tried fighting it," Harold said, flipping through appeal notices. "But every time I showed up at a board meeting, I'd suddenly miss a deadline, or my case got rescheduled." He gave a dry chuckle. "They stalled me until I gave up." I left Harold with a full folder and a gut full of fire. Next stop, 2 blocks over. Carla, mid-40s, landscaping business owner. The kind of woman who could name 20 plants in 5 seconds flat. Gary had fined her for non-native flora. Translation? She'd planted lavender. HOA-approved lavender. 2 years ago. She showed me the violation bill. Almost $2,000 in escalating penalties. "I framed it on the fridge," she said bitterly. "Reminds me not to negotiate with bullies." That's when it clicked. Everyone being targeted had one thing in common. They didn't toe the line. They voted no, asked questions, pushed back, and now they were being fined into submission. This wasn't a rogue clipboard with a God complex. This was organized punishment, a system designed to grind down the dissenters. Back home, I rewatched my footage of Gary, but slower this time. Not just listening, observing. His eyes didn't drift. They scanned, focused, shed, gate, mailbox. He wasn't looking for violations. He was casing my house. This wasn't enforcement. It was reconnaissance. And now that I knew their playbook, I was going to flip the whole board. I got back in touch with the DA's office. They looped in a young ADA, Renee, sharp, fast-talking, and not the type to flinch when you say racketeering in the same breath as HOA president. I sent her everything. The mic audio, the video, the phony violation forms, Harold's folder, Carla's bills. She barely paused before saying, "Give me a week. If half of this holds, we'll bury them." While Renee worked her angle, I set the trap. Gary would come back. Guys like him always do, especially when they think they've found a soft target. I gave him bait, barely legal bait. Garden hose left slightly askew. A sticker on the trash bin that said, "Property is city." A rake leaning against the shed. Then came the wiring. 2 cameras in the fence. One hidden inside a birdhouse. One in a bush aimed at the side gate. Audio synced. Timestamps locked. Private server. No leaks. On day 3, Harold sent a text. "He's making round again. Just left my place. Showtime." I sat in the backyard pretending to read. Hoodie up, coffee in hand. 20 minutes later, the tan sedan rolled in like clockwork. Gary stepped out, clipboard swinging, sunglasses glinting. He didn't knock. Just walked into my backyard like it was public access. Well, he said, mock friendly. "Still haven't fixed your drainage issue, huh?" "What drainage?" I didn't look up. Snap, snap. He started taking photos. Humming, fake casual. Tools left unsecured. Garden waste improperly stored. Is that a non-standard sprinkler head? Then the pitch. "I might be able to recommend leniency," he said, voice lowering. "Say a few $100 and this whole thing goes away. I waited until he leaned in close, confident. You ever worry someone might be recording you? I asked. He laughed. Not legal without permission. I stood up. It is when it's my property. His smirk froze, just a flicker, but it was enough. I watched his brain stall, eyes darting behind those mirrored lenses. I didn't give him a second to recover. You're going to want to stay right there, I said, calm as clockwork. A patrol car will be pulling up in about 60 seconds. Might want to consider your options while you still have any. His posture stiffened, fight or flight kicking in. But he was boxing. My driveway's tight. 2 unmarked cruisers slid in from opposite ends like synchronized swimmers. No lights, no sirens, just presence. Gary looked like a raccoon in a freezer light. Sweating, clutching that clipboard like it was a life raft. I'm authorized by the board, he barked. His voice cracked. Not anymore, I said. And soon, neither will they be. They cuffed him right there by the hydrangeas. What started as a ridiculous fine over 2 shiny grass had just detonated into a full-blown takedown. The next morning, the entire neighborhood buzzed. People stood on porches pretending to water non-existent plants. Others walked dogs they didn't own. Everyone wanted a glimpse. Everyone had a theory. But more than that, they had hope. Fear had cracked. And in its place, curiosity, quiet smiles, relief. Gary was just the first domino. The clipboard enforcer was off the board. But I wasn't done, because corruption like this, it doesn't just grow from the ground up. It drips from the top down. And I had a damn good idea who'd been holding Gary's leash. Brenda Kellerman, HOA president, polished, smiling, sharp as a serpent's tooth. I'd never seen her deliver a violation personally. That's what pawns were for. But now that Gary was in cuffs, the queen was exposed. And I don't play chess. I flipped the table. First thing I did was lay out everything on the table. Literally. Fines. Signatures. Footage. A timeline so precise you could set a watch to it. I cross-referenced every enforcement action with board votes, homeowner dissent, and, this was key, property sales. And a pattern started humming so loud. It was deafening. Every violation tied back to one of 2 things. A resident who'd voted against giving Brenda more executive power, or a house that had sold below market within 6 months of that vote. Not 1 or 2 coincidences. Dozens. And most of those homes flipped fast, cleaned up relist, and sold through Kellerman Realty, her husband's company. That's when it became crystal clear. This wasn't about overzealous lawn care enforcement. This was real estate piracy in a pantsuit. Brenda was using her title to shake people down, scare them out, snap up the bones. And Gary? He wasn't a rogue enforcer. He was the muscle. But to take her down, I needed more than data and motive. I needed her voice, her hands. I needed intent. So I went where people let their guards down. Social media. I made a fake account, Lisa Hartley, friendly, new in the neighborhood, eager to get involved. I joined the private HOA Facebook group, dropped a few likes, asked innocent questions. Brenda was quick to respond. Warm, cordial, too cordial. When I asked how to stay on the board's good side, she messaged me directly. Support the vision and things tend to stay smooth. We take care of our own. I sent the screen grabs to Renee. She said it was suggestive, but not damning. So I pushed further. I told Brenda I was nervous. Didn't want to step on toes. Asked how inspections really worked. Her reply? Don't worry about Gary anymore. He got sloppy. I'm handling things personally now. Checkmate was coming. I asked for a meetup. Nothing formal. Just Lisa Hartley, the new neighbor, curious about helping the HOA behind the scenes. Brenda agreed without hesitation. Told me we could grab coffee at a cafe just off the main road. Someplace quiet, where the board used to meet before things got official. I wore a wig, sunglasses, and a wired mic tape beneath my shirt. Nothing fancy. Just enough. As soon as she walked in, polished blazer, oversized bag, manicured to moon, I knew she'd rehearsed this kind of charm 100 times. She sat down, smiled like we were old friends, and dove straight into strategy. No small talk. No hesitation. "This neighborhood's a gem," she said, sipping her espresso. "But gems need polish. And polish takes oversight. People don't always understand that. So sometimes we persuade." I asked how she chose who got extra attention. Her eyes twinkled. "The loud ones. The ones who say no. We can't have chaos in paradise." Then I dropped the bait. "What about Gary?" She waved her hand, dismissive. Gary was useful until he wasn't. Got greedy. Made it messy. I've kept things cleaner since. Clean. Right. She talked for 20 minutes about influence, strategic compliance, and how some homeowners just don't belong long-term. She even mentioned one specific house. "We'll give them a few more fines, then an offer to make it go away. Most folks take the out." Every word, crystal clear audio. When she stood to leave, she patted my hand. "You're one of the good ones, Lisa. Don't worry, support us and things stay easy." I sent the audio to Renee that night. She called me less than 10 minutes later. "You just gave us the smoking gun." 2 days later, Brenda stood at a podium, giving a speech about community pride, when plainclothes officers whispered in her ear. She didn't finish the sentence. The wine glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the clubhouse floor. You could feel the ripple in the air, the kind of silence that happens right before a thunderclap. 2 officers escorted her out gently, but there was no mistaking what it was. A takedown, right in front of the people she'd lorded over for years. No headlines yet, but every neighbor with a camera phone was already typing. Back at home, I sat on the porch. Just listened. Birds. Wind chimes. No fines. No threats. No clipboard warriors stalking garden beds. It was the first real quiet the neighborhood had felt in a long time. But I knew it wasn't over, because buried in the seized files from Brenda's office, tucked inside a manila folder labeled 2025 Strategy, was a list of addresses, people the board had flagged for future compliance reviews. One of them was a retired librarian. Another, a single mom, but the name at the top, Reuben Marks. He lived 3 doors down. Widower, kept to himself, fixed clocks in his garage, and always smiled when you waved. I'd never seen him speak at a meeting, never heard a peep about HOA drama. So why was he first? I went over that afternoon. Knocked once. He answered like he'd been expecting someone. Not sure who, but not surprised. I explained everything. Gary, Brenda, the arrests, the investigation. He just nodded, then wordlessly walked into back room. Came out holding a slim folder. Inside, 3 violations. Hedge height, unauthorized signage for a handmade welcome sign his late wife had painted. And, get this, accusation of running a business. Because he fixed clocks for free. He looked up at me, half smiling. "I didn't fight them," he said softly. "Didn't want the trouble, but maybe it's time someone did." I spent the next week walking door to door, just like Gary had. But I wasn't handing out citations. I was listening, gathering, building something stronger than fear. 10 homes. 7 had already been fined. 2 were in the middle of selling, pushed out by mounting violations they couldn't afford to keep fighting. One woman broke down crying as she told me she'd been convinced she was losing her mind. "I thought I was being paranoid," she whispered. Like, maybe I was a problem. She wasn't. They were. That same week, the retaliation started again. Not as obvious this time. A parking complaint mysteriously filed against my driveway. My trash bin tagged for being out 10 minutes late. A dent in my mailbox that looked an awful lot like the one Gary once threatened me over. Then came the unsigned letter. Interference in community operations may carry legal consequences. Desperate, sloppy, and exactly what I needed to take to the judge. Renee filed a motion to suspend the HOA's enforcement power during the investigation. While we waited, the board called an emergency meeting. I wasn't invited, so I showed up anyway, badge on my hip, folder in my hand, and 2 plainclothes officers at my side. Carl Renshaw, the acting president, looked like he'd swallowed a tack. I asked if the board planned to keep issuing fines during an active criminal investigation. Carl sputtered something about due process, until I dropped the signed statements on the table. Transcripts, screenshots, recordings, 10 witnesses, 1 paper trail. The room went dead silent. The judge ruled the next morning. Enforcement suspended. Indefinitely. No fines. No inspections. No threats on letterhead. Kids rode bikes down the street again. Garden gnomes came out of hiding. Flags reappeared on porches. Reuben? He was nominated to lead the new community council. He accepted, cried, and just like that, the neighborhood finally felt like ours again.